Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hi, and welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama, and I thank you for joining me for another episode of the podcast. And this week, my guest is Matt Foster. He runs the Etsy shop Black Dog Ironworks. He also has his own e-commerce website. It's blackdogironworks.com. And of course, I will link to both in the show notes for this episode. But Matt, thank you so much for being my guest and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. Now, before we jump right into it, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a husband and a father, and I live in Enfield, Maine, where I'm a professional blacksmith. And of course, I run my Etsy shop and my e-commerce site.
Yes. And I'm so intrigued by your story because you didn't start off aiming to do this full time, but yours is one of those stories where it sounds like you kind of fell into it and everything just clicked. So
yeah, it really did. I mean, it was like all these sort of life events came together and culminated in me doing this. And yeah, everything just sort of came together and really worked.
So before you were on Etsy, what were you doing?
Before I was on Etsy, I was working for the University of Maine, and I was their sculpture studio technician. So I was teaching students how to use the equipment in their sculpture studio. They have a full wood shop and a full metal shop. So I had a lot of experience in the art world working there. And I also worked on my own sculpture as well. So, yeah.
So, are you originally self-taught, or did you formerly learn the craft of blacksmithing?
So, I actually learned it as a student at the University of Maine. So I was studying sculpture there before they hired me.
Okay.
And they have a small blacksmithing setup in their sculpture studio. And so I learned the basics there.
Yeah.
And after that, I taught myself the rest. I mean, I bought every book I could and I watched every YouTube video I could and really just absorbed it. And then after a lot of practice, I was able to start making some money at it.
When did you first realize that you had an affinity for blacksmithing? When did you first even learn about the craft to know that it was something you wanted to try?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was at school. It was at the university. I mean, when I transitioned from being a student to working in the studio as an employee, I was responsible for teaching the students how to run the forge and do all the techniques that I was taught. Yeah. So I felt like it was my responsibility to really know what I was talking about and really know the craft inside and out. And so that's when I started doing a lot more research into it. And so that when I would teach the students, I wouldn't be leading them in the wrong direction.
Right. So when did you first discover Etsy? When did Etsy come up on your radar?
This was probably around 2012, and I actually had a shop previous to this one, but I only made a couple sales. It wasn't anything really serious. I was just thinking maybe I could use my ability to make things to make a little bit of extra money while I was in school. I didn't really continue it. I closed the shop up, and then later on I started the new one.
Okay. Now, when you closed the other one up, were you at any point running both, or you just shut that one down and then started afresh with?
No, I just shut that one down. I mean, it was really I maybe only had it open for a couple months. And yeah.
Okay. So when you originally opened your Etsy shop, what was the original goal or intent of the shop? Was it just to make some side income, or was your goal always to go full time with it?
It was really just to make that little bit of extra money on the side. The reason I started the shop, I think people often have things in their lives that sort of push them in certain directions. And really the one thing in my life was that my wife and I had our first daughter. And that really pushed me to start the Etsy shop, because we were kind of tight on money already. And I've already had some of the equipment necessary to do it. So it was my wife actually kind of pushed me a little bit to do the shop. Yeah, because we were kind of thinking, well, how can we make some extra money? And she knew that I had this shop before, and she was like, well, maybe you could try again and make it into something more. And so, yeah, that's how it all started.
Nice. I love it when it's the spouse that is the one that's telling the other person, hey, look, you can do something with this. Try it.
Yeah. Yep.
That support is so important. So when you originally started, so this was the second time around, did you have any reservations about getting back onto the platform? Perhaps because the first time around, it just didn't pan out the way you might have thought, or this time around, did you feel it was different and the outcome might be different?
Well, it was different because I think I put more into it, I wasn't really serious about the first time. And so the second time around, I did a lot of research into Etsy, and I read the handbook and everything, and really, really put my heart and soul into it, and really tried to, make it into something real,
Yeah. Would you say that having come the second time fully prepared, for someone else who's listening now and hasn't yet opened up their shop, do you think it's better to first just jump in and then start figuring things out, or to take some time beforehand, get all your ducks in a row, and then come on?
I think it's good to jump in. I think it's good to jump in and explore the platform and read the handbook and, do a little bit of research into it. But, you can get on there and start putting up some listings. And, I think there's on the forums, there's always people who I think are saying things about, preparing to open up the shop or preparing to do it. And I think, you just got to do it. You just got to jump in there and, start putting it out there.
Yeah. And I like to ask that question because every now and then I'll get an email from someone who says, oh, I'm planning on starting my Etsy shop. And when I respond, one of the things I always like to say is, if you're thinking about doing it, just do it. Once you're in there, you can start paddling. You can start figuring things out. But if you take too long to decide, it might just not happen.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, when you opened Black Dog Ironworks, do you remember how long it took you to get that very first sale?
I want to say it was a couple weeks.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
Yeah. So I opened it in October of 2014, and I had my first sale in October.
Nice.
And I think it was for some wall hooks, which is a pretty traditional thing for a blacksmith to make. That's one of the first things you kind of learn how to make is just a simple hook to hang on the wall. And I sold 10 of them for $30, I want to say.
Wow.
Yep. And that customer actually ended up coming back a couple times after that. So,
do you tend to have a lot of repeat customers?
I do, yeah. I definitely do, yeah.
Yeah. Now, just talking about blacksmithing, because I just thought about this. Typically, do you make and keep a large inventory, or do you make one of everything that you have listed in your shop, and then as you get the orders, you make them, just so that you're not holding on to a lot of things?
In the beginning, I didn't. Right now, I definitely have an inventory.
Okay.
But in the beginning, I didn't really know what was going to sell or what people were interested in. So I would make one or two of an item and document them and list them on the site and see how they went, you know?
Yeah. Now, typically, and I know there's not nothing typical really, you sell a wide variety of household items, which has a very distinct and distinctive look. You have bottle openers and coat racks and hooks, curtain ties. There's a flower you have, which I absolutely love.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And how long typically does it take you to create something?
Well, it definitely varies by item. I mean, there's obviously some items that are a lot more complex and some that aren't. And definitely over time, I get faster at making each one. So they're all made by hand, every single one of them. And in the beginning, you know, for a simple bottle opener, it might have taken me half an hour to make one. And now I can do probably 3 in about half an hour.
Yeah.
And you sort of learn, you sort of gain that muscle memory of how to make each item, and so as you go, things start to develop faster. I have some items that take a little bit longer. Some of the coat racks that are much more complex, the higher priced ones, they can take 3 or 4 hours, to make one. So,
wow. Do you feel, or do you think that blacksmithing is, and particularly on Etsy, a niche that is currently getting saturated, or do you think that there's still room in the marketplace for other blacksmithers?
I think there is still some room. When I first started, there were not very many. But over time, there's been sort of a resurrection lately of blacksmithing. And I think that probably has to do with the TV show Forged in Fire.
Yeah.
I get asked all the time whenever people find out I'm a blacksmith if I watch the show or if I want to be on the show. And so that I think that culture has really started to push blacksmithing more out there.
Yes.
And so there's a lot more hobby blacksmiths out there and that are posting on Etsy. But I think there's still probably some room. I mean, we as blacksmiths have the ability to really make our products stand out from each other,
Yeah.
So there are other blacksmiths on the site that sell bottle openers, but they don't sell bottle openers like I make.
Right.
They're very different. There's some that are very different and there's some that are much more similar, but I think there's still a lot of room.
Okay. So I'm going to ask, do you watch Forged in Steel?
Forged in Fire, yeah.
I'm sorry, Forged in Fire.
That's okay. I've watched one episode. My wife and I don't actually have cable, but I've watched one episode online. I'm not really a bladesmith, and that show focuses on bladesmithing.
Okay.
So yeah, they're a little bit different. I mean, they have a lot of the same. I mean, you use some of the same equipment, but bladesmithing is like a much more specialized craft than blacksmithing is.
Now, because you used to teach students, I know one of the things some Etsy sellers do is when they're really good at their craft, they branch out into education as well. So offering tutorials or live classes and workshops. Is that something that you think, if not now, perhaps down the road, might be something you could add to your repertoire?
Definitely. I would probably have to hire 1 or 2 employees because I'm very swamped with the work that I already have. But
wow,
I would like to expand. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about pricing. So you mentioned that your very first sale was you sold 10 coat racks for $30.
Yep.
At the time, did you put much thought into how you were going to price those items, and has that changed today when it comes to pricing your products?
At that time it was sort of what was fair. I felt like what was fair for what I was selling. And I mean, I still feel that today, but my work has definitely improved from back then. I mean, it's been, 4 years now. So, I've definitely become a much better blacksmith since then. My craft has definitely improved. So, I don't have like a particular formula like some people do. I do figure out what it costs me in materials and my time, and I try to price it based off of that. But then I also do some market research based off of what other people are selling these items for. And just accounting for all of that.
Matt, can we talk about time management? Right now, you're a one-man show. How does your typical day go, and how do you manage all the tasks that need to get done?
I'm pretty flexible with my schedule, but I definitely have sort of a flow that I go through. So I'm an early riser. I'm usually up by like 5:30, 6 o'clock. And one of the first things that I do in the morning is I'll try to answer emails. I usually get quite a few messages through the night. And then after that, I'll take a look at my orders that I have and my inventory and sort of figure out what I need to make that day. Because some of the items that I have on Etsy, the quantity that's listed might not necessarily be the quantity that I have because I sell on multiple sites. So, if I don't have enough inventory, I have to plan to make some of that inventory that day in order to get the items shipped. I try to have my items shipped like within in one business day. And so I try to do that for most items. Some of my more complex items, I'll tell people 3 to 5 days, but I try to do it pretty quick. So after I figure out what I need to make that day, I'll usually make myself some coffee and go out to my workshop. My workshop is a separate building from my house. I actually built it last summer, and so I'll go out there and start some work. And after I get the stuff that I need to make that day, I'll get it packaged up and get it shipped. And then once everything's shipped, I'll usually answer emails again in the afternoon, and that's my day.
Wow. So typically, what time does your day end?
Usually around 4 o'clock.
Oh, that's not bad. But it helps that you wake up so early.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you sell on multiple platforms. You're on Amazon Handmade, and you have your own e-commerce website. I will link to both in the show notes for this episode so folks can go check them out as well. How do you manage, you mentioned how you manage your inventory. So if you mentioned that already. How do you handle shipping though? Do you use one tool to what's the word? I can't remember the word I'm thinking of. But do you use one tool to handle all your shipping, or do you do shipping separately for Etsy, then for blackdogironworks.com, and then Amazon Handmade?
I use ShipStation, so it makes it way easier because I can import from every site that I have and ship everything from one platform without having to go between them.
Okay. Oh, perfect. How about inventory management? I know now you said you kind of know, but do you use any specific systems for managing inventory? So let's say if you have something listed on Etsy, it will tell you the quantity you have altogether. So if you get an order from Amazon or your e-commerce website, it automatically deducts that.
I don't have anything specific. I mean, I use QuickBooks for my bookkeeping, but the QuickBooks I have, I think, is actually QuickBooks Enterprise, and that allows me to keep track of my materials and how, what the materials go into each item, and it also keeps track of my inventory for me. So that's one way that I keep track of my inventory. But I always try to keep my listings the quantities available high. Like I try to keep things around like 20 or 25, which is actually one thing that I would change about Etsy. On my own website, it's a Squarespace site. I can go in and I can say that I want the quantity to be unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
And so people can buy as many as they want. So if someone were to buy more than what I had, I could send them a message and say, hey, it might take me a day to make, some more of these or something.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's actually something I would like to see on Etsy is if you could make it so that people could buy whatever quantity they wanted and you didn't have to worry about going back in and updating that quantity. I feel like I've lost sales because of that, because I definitely know that like during busier times, like some of my items will sell out or they'll get to a lower quantity and people want to buy multiples of some of these items.
Yeah.
And some people won't message me. I'm sure that some people just won't do it, but other people will. And so I do get these messages from people who want to buy more than what I have available as far as the quantity goes. So that's one of the changes I'd like to see on Etsy.
That is a great point. I never thought about that.
Yep.
That you are limited in how the quantity that you can offer. But yes, something like yours where somebody might want more, that would actually be a really great addition to make it unlimited.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned your own website is built on Squarespace.
Mm-hmm.
How easy or difficult was it to build an e-commerce site on Squarespace? I'm not very familiar with Squarespace.
It was pretty easy. I mean, they have the templates, and I just selected a template, and you sort of plug everything in, So it kind of made it easy that I had the Etsy site first, because I could actually copy some of the like my listing descriptions and stuff right into Squarespace, and so that made it pretty easy.
Does Squarespace give you the option to optimize your listings or your website for search engines and specific keywords?
Yeah, they do have some search engine optimization features. I did it quite a while ago, so I don't remember exactly, and I haven't really updated it. But yeah, I think they have a similar thing to the handbook. They have like their own help section for people who have And so I just went in through there and, looked up what they recommended that their site owners do.
Oh, nice. And is it relatively affordable?
Yeah, I actually have the highest, the most expensive one of their plans, but I think in order to sell on the site, it was around $20 or $25, and I think the one that I have is $50, and that just comes with a few more features. And they keep releasing new features all the time, and so I really like Squarespace.
Oh, good. Now, when you were considering starting your own website, which is a great idea for everyone who sells online, did you look at any other platforms? I know a lot of people gravitate towards Shopify, but
no, I haven't used Shopify before. I had used Squarespace before, so I knew that it was kind of easy, and I kind of already had an idea of how it was going to work for me, so that's why I used it.
One of the things I noticed is your Squarespace site, which again, for anyone listening, you want to jump over there and take a look. It's blackdogironworks.com. It's purely e-commerce. You don't have at least I don't see a blog or anything.
No, I don't really blog. So
have you found that has, well, if you don't, I guess there's no way to compare, but do you still get good traffic with it just being a purely e-commerce site?
Yeah, I've had to do some of my own promotion for it. So, usually on my social media, I'll link back to, blackdogironworks.com rather than my Etsy site.
Right. Yes.
And, I've been in a few magazines, and, that's definitely generated some traffic for me.
Okay.
So there's other ways that I've gotten traffic to it, but, It's definitely not as much as Etsy. Etsy is a lot more than my website.
Right. And plus Etsy has that audience already.
Yeah. Yeah.
And primarily the reason I'm asking is because I know that a lot of people put pressure on ourselves, to have a blog in addition to our e-commerce site because, people out in the internet sphere will say, you need to do some writing to pull in traffic, but it's good to know that there are other ways to do it, especially for those of us who aren't as inclined to want to write so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of social media, do you have a particular or any specific strategy that you use when it comes to promoting your products and driving traffic where you want it to go?
Well, I use Instagram, and because of that, you can post both on Instagram and Facebook at the same time. So I use both Instagram and Facebook, but I mostly post on Instagram and then link it to the Facebook page. I've definitely gotten some traffic from my Facebook page, and a little bit from my Instagram, but definitely more from the Facebook page itself. And it's kind of interesting. Instagram has sort of become a haven for blacksmiths. Like,
really?
I think maybe it's because it's like a really visual, it's a visual art to begin with, and then Instagram's a visual platform. So there's really definitely a community feel within the blacksmith community on Instagram.
Yeah.
So,
and do you tend to post more videos and stories, or do you use your feed more?
It's a combination. I've actually never done a story, but I've I'll do some videos every now and then, and I'll do usually just pictures and updates on what I'm doing.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I said this on the air already, but I showed the video in your Etsy shop, your about section, to my niece and nephew who were talking about forging, and it was just amazing to watch how it just comes to be, and to see the steel so hot and then malleable when you're making it.
Yeah.
We were like, we watched it like 3 times. Like, how does he do? Like, they were asking, how does he know what shape and how to get it into the specific shape he wants? And I'm like, I don't know, but it's amazing.
Well, I've done those. Like, I think the one you're talking about, I'm making a hook in it.
Yes.
And I mean, I've made so many of those, so it's I could probably do it in my sleep.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fun to watch. So I can imagine how that draws attention on Instagram, because, like you said, it's so visual, and people love those in the, what they call it, in process type videos.
Yep.
Yeah. You could probably do just as well on YouTube as well.
I actually have a YouTube. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, actually you do. You do.
Yep.
I need to check that out. Yes.
Yep. So there's definitely, there's a few more videos on there. They're longer. So, I think on Instagram you can only do 30 seconds. Is that what it is?
Something like that.
Yeah. So, sometimes if I make a new video showing how I make one of my products, I might post a little snippet onto Instagram. Yeah.
Now, in the time you've been on Etsy, have you ever had to deal with any disputes or less than 5-star feedback? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yeah, there's been maybe 2 cases that I can remember.
Okay.
One of them, I don't even remember what it was about. They gave me a bad review. I don't remember why, but I just sent them a message and said, because they didn't, send me a message or anything about it. So I sent them a message asking them what was wrong, and we resolved it, and she changed the review. And then, another one was actually relatively recently, and it was someone who didn't read the description of the product, which I know happens all the time. I mean, that's one of the first things you'll learn is that the customers do not read.
Yeah.
So I, there was a little bit of a dispute about the sizing of something, and they insisted that I sent them the wrong size of something. And
Right.
and I could tell just from looking at the photo they sent me that no, it was the right one. And so, I told them that, I could send them some new product, but that they wouldn't be happy still because it'd be the same. And then I told them I could give them a refund if they wanted to, and I never heard back from them. And then they ended up giving me a bad review, actually, a long ways down the road, like after that, maybe over a month after our conversation. And some people, I just don't think you're going to make them happy, and so I just left it there, and I actually didn't see, I was a little bit worried about, are people going to buy from me now if they see this bad review? But it actually, I think it was only within a couple hours I had another order, and so I wasn't too worried about it after that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes, depending on how people phrase their negative reviews, most rational people will read them and can tell, whether or not it's a well-balanced review.
Yeah.
So, well, that's unfortunate. But it's nice to hear that, even though you had that experience, it didn't deter others from still doing business with you, and to hear how you handled it, at least in the cases, in the other case too, where you were able to work things out. And yes, everybody needs to know there are some people that will just not be happy.
Yep.
Some people are fishing for their money back and to keep the product, and you'll know that when you come across them. But some people just they won't be happy, period.
Yep.
Now, do you ever find that you get in a creative rut? And if you do, how do you typically pull yourself out?
Yeah, I do. Every now and then, maybe traffic will slow down or my sales will slow down, and I'll kind of feel like, well, maybe I need to come up with something new. And sometimes it can be kind of hard. You feel sort of under pressure to come up with something else. And I usually just go on Instagram and Etsy and look at what other people are doing and try to get some inspiration from them. And I'm definitely not trying to copy anybody, but just trying to gain some inspiration about what other people are doing.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, because I was talking to someone else who said something similar, that to just get the creative juices flowing again, she does the same thing, goes on Instagram and Etsy, not to copy, but just to, see what other people are doing. And then that inspires new ideas. And I never thought about that before, because when I creatively shut down, I just feel like, okay, I need to go and sleep or something.
Yeah.
And just wait it out. But I've never thought of going to get inspiration from somewhere else.
Yeah. I think another good one is Pinterest. I use Pinterest as well. Not as much as I use like Facebook or Instagram, but Pinterest is a good one to go to. And a lot of times the inspiration or, the end product that I would come up with is really far from what inspired it, so it might just be the look of something or a certain kind of product, and it gets your thoughts going about, well, maybe I could do this or this, and it just gets those creative juices flowing.
Yeah. Now, I meant to ask this earlier regarding selling on Amazon Handmade. I know it seems like it's coming from left field at this point, but I wanted to just ask, have you found it worth it to sell on Amazon Handmade? I never tried it, but I know that I've heard the fees are a lot higher than Etsy's fees. But at the end of the day, for you, has it been worth it to have a presence on there?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah, the fees are definitely a lot more, and so I've had to make my prices higher on Amazon as opposed to other places in order to make up for it.
Okay.
Not by a lot, but just enough to make up for that extra fee.
Yeah.
And it's been worth it. I don't put as much time into it as I put into either my Etsy site or my website.
Okay.
It's sort of the last thing on my mind is Amazon Handmade, and but it's sort of for me like a set it and forget it type of thing. I just put the stuff up there, and then I'll get an order, and it imports right into ShipStation just like everything else.
Okay.
And yeah, so and not a lot of people actually send you any messages or anything on it. So yeah, at least not that I've found.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely been worth it. It's just a little extra boost, a little bit more exposure. It's just another place that people can find you. So
Okay.
that's why I've done it.
Okay, good to know. Now, being someone who does sell on Amazon Handmade and Etsy, I don't know if you were paying a lot of attention when Amazon Handmade first came out and people were touting it as the platform that was going to be the end of Etsy. Do you think that is a possibility that one day Amazon Handmade could take over the handmade selling world and in essence replace Etsy as I don't want to say it's the leader, but I mean, I don't know, maybe it is. I don't have any stats. But my question is, do you think Amazon Handmade could one day take a much bigger place on the handmade marketplace stage?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that Etsy has really put themselves out there. They are the place to go for handmade items, and they've become a household name, much like Amazon.
Yeah.
And I think that they've really focused on making it easy for sellers and really worth their time. And I think that's one of the reasons that Amazon's not going to be able to overtake them. And I think that Etsy has a better focus on what they're trying to provide and sell to people versus Amazon, which is all over the place. I mean, it's A to Z, right?
Yes.
So I think that Etsy will definitely stay on top.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's good to keep in mind. Because Amazon is so big and every time they do something, they do it in a big way, or as some people would say, they do it bigly. I love that word. I don't know why, but I like it. So, sometimes we or, folks in the Etsy community might get inside our heads thinking, Amazon has now come in and the world is going to end if I don't link up with them somehow.
Yeah, when I first heard about Amazon Handmade starting, I definitely signed up for it, but because I think you have to apply for it, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, so I applied for it and they accepted me, but I actually didn't do anything with it for a long time.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's good to know because Amazon also has this, I don't know if you're familiar with Merch. Have you heard of Merch?
Merch? No, I haven't.
So it's their platform for, and I know this is a tangent, but I'll keep it quick. It's a platform for graphic designers, specifically if you make designs for T-shirts or clothing. Yeah. And so you can upload your designs and Amazon will have them printed on T-shirts or sweatshirts or hoodies or any type of clothing. And so it's called Merch by Amazon. Merch by Amazon. And so I applied because I was creating, designs, and I thought, oh, okay. I was selling them on Spreadshirt, which is purely just for that. Yep. And so when Amazon came out with theirs too, I was like, oh, well, Amazon is doing it. It must be the best thing. I'm going to apply.
Yeah.
And I got accepted, and like you, for the longest time, I was just like, ugh, okay, I'll get to it one day. It's one more thing on my to-do list that I didn't need to add. But yes, like you said, it's nice as another place to show up. Sure. And it's not much effort once you get everything in place. I think that's the good thing about Amazon is it's so automated. Once you set systems up in it, that it's worth it for anyone who has a type of product that can be sold on Amazon to just set things up. Your pricing is probably going to be very different than other platforms or your own e-commerce website because the fees are a lot higher. But once you get that ball rolling, you can pretty much forget it.
Yep.
What would you say are some things that you think you did that specifically have helped set you up to be successful on Etsy?
There's two things I think that are that really, I think, put me ahead of others. One of the things was when I first started Etsy, I didn't pour all of my money into it, all my money and time. And what I mean by that is I looked for ways that I could make things a little more efficient for me. So in for instance, like when I would make a product, I would have made one or two at a time. We already kind of talked about this, but I'd make one or two and then I'd list it and I would wait and see if people would buy it and if people were interested in it or if people had questions about it. And if people started buying it, then, I'd make more and I'd start to build up my inventory. So I wasn't making a lot of inventory at once. Yeah. And I was sort of exploring what people wanted and what people liked. Yeah. And then the second thing is, back on the first one. Another thing was like for shipping, like I didn't spend a bunch of money on shipping boxes or shipping labels or anything like that. Instead, I went to USPS and I got some of their flat rate boxes, which works really well for me because I'm selling some pretty heavy items. I mean, they're all steel, so they can be kind of heavy. So I think it's up to like 75 pounds you can ship in those boxes. And a little bit of a tangent, those boxes have actually worked really well for me for some of my wholesale orders. I had a customer who bought 1,000 bottle openers from me, and I had to ship it to him, and I was kind of like, wow, am I gonna have to do like freight or something? But I could actually fit 200 bottle openers into one of the large flat rate boxes, and I just double boxed them and really taped them up, and it only cost me, I think it was like 55 pounds, and it only cost me like whatever it is, it's like $17 or something for it. Yeah, so it was actually really cost effective for it, and it worked out really well. But the flat rate boxes. So I wasn't spending a lot of time or a lot of money on all these different boxes. I just went to them and got their free ones. And of course, my customers would then have to pay for the priority shipping, which is now why I have my own boxes now so that I can offer first class for some of my smaller stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So then the second thing I would say that set me up was I really listened to my customers. So whenever someone would buy something or would ask me a question about something, I would kind of make a mental note about it. And so one example of this is with my bottle openers. So when I first started selling bottle openers, I got a couple messages from people asking if I could personalize them, if I could add like a name or a date to them. And I was like, well, I guess I can. I mean, there's no reason that I really can't. So I bought a set of numbers and letters stamps, and I started offering the personalized bottle openers. And that item in itself is actually what caused me to start doing this full time. Really? The personalized bottle openers. So I actually had to go and look this up because I was thinking about this earlier. What was the change after I started offering these? And so in 2015, I only had 202 sales. And I started offering the personalized bottle openers in January of 2016. And I went from 202 sales in 2015 to 1,050 sales in 2016.
Whoa.
And it was all because of the personalized openers.
Wow.
Yep. It really, I mean, so all it took was me listening to those first couple of customers coming and asking me about if I could offer this to them, and I was like, well, yeah, I guess I can. And I think a more recent example of this is I had a customer who had been buying a few custom items from me, and then they came to me and asked me to make them some shelf brackets. So I made them these shelf brackets, and I posted a picture on Instagram of them. And then I started getting messages from people like, hey, could you make those like in this size for me or this size for me? And I was like, well, yeah, I guess I can. And so I was like, well, I guess I can offer them as a standard product on my site and on Etsy. And that's been working out really well. I mean, it's only been maybe a month or two now, but I've sold quite a few of those, and that's definitely been a little boost. And all it took was listening to what people wanted, So that's what I would say is listen to your customers.
Matt, I love that. That is like the best case scenario you'd want in, when you're running your Etsy shop, is to be told by your customers what the market wants, and then
exactly.
be it.
Yeah, well, they are the market, right?
Yeah.
So, you really have to listen to what your customers want to say. I mean, it's really basically that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. I believe the numbers, but it's just outstanding.
Yeah, so it was like 5 times as much just because I made that change and made that one product. So
yeah, amazing. Okay, so that's a lesson to anyone listening now. Pay attention to your convos and what people are asking you for, and see if you can apply that to your shop at large. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Now, do you do all your own product photography? Because I was looking at the personalized bottle openers and well, basically everything, and the product photography is great.
Thank you. Yeah, I do all my photography. I actually when I first went to school, it's kind of a complicated story, a kind of weird roundabout way that ended getting me into blacksmithing and here talking to you. But I first went to school to study architecture, and I did well in it, but it really wasn't, it wasn't really something that I felt like I really wanted to keep doing it. So then I'd always been into art and dabbled in photography a little bit. So the school that I went to at that time, they had a photography program that was pretty good. So I decided, well, I'll try photography. So I was a photography major for a semester, and really dived into that and learned that. And so having the experience with that, it was actually all film photography. So, which surprisingly transferred really well into digital, because it's all built around the same ideas of how light works with the camera. And so that played a role in my photography. But then also when I was a sculpture student, when I was an art student at the University of Maine, one of the things that they teach you there is how to document your artwork, and documenting my sculpture isn't all that different from documenting the products that I make. Yeah. And so that, I think, sort of helped me develop my my product photography.
It helped a lot. It's great. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Do you tend to do your photography as you create, or do you set aside a specific time to just do all photography and then editing and all that?
It's in batches. So okay. I actually recently redid all my photography. So it was January, February of this past year, okay. or of this year. And I because that's sort of a slow time for, I think, most makers, is right after the holidays. So I decided I was going to use some of that downtime to redevelop some of my photography. So I did all my existing products at that time. And then I recently added like those shelf brackets I was talking about. I recently added a few different designs of those. So when I added those to this site, or after I'd finished designing them and creating them, I would photograph them all at once. So it was like, in batches.
Okay. Are there any specific tools or tips you can give to someone listening now who just wants to up their photography game a bit?
I think for me, I purchased a light kit, and that made a big difference. The first photos I had were all natural light from some windows, but they weren't as consistent as I wanted them to be.
Okay.
So I bought, I think it was around $400, which is kind of a lot, but I got 3 lights, and those definitely help with the product photography. Okay. What else? Having a variety of photos, I think, is important too. So I usually try to have the product that I'm selling almost in use, like in a setting, right? So for like the shelf brackets, I'll have them actually installed on a wall with a shelf and things on the shelf, so that people kind of get an idea of how they could use that item. Okay. But then I also have the white background photos that show just the item. And then another thing is to show some details. So for instance, like on the shelf brackets, it's a good example. There's one particular shelf bracket that has some rivets on it. And so I'll focus on those rivets and take a close-up shot of those, so people kind of get an idea of the overall product and what the product will look like in their setting, but they can also get some more details from it, from the more detailed photos. I do use Photoshop, and I use Lightroom. I actually have an Adobe subscription. Like they have I want to say it's not very expensive. It was maybe $20 a month, but they give you the whole Adobe suite essentially.
Everything?
And you can, almost. There might be a few things that they don't include, but I primarily use Lightroom and Photoshop from that. So
okay. How about your camera? Do you use your smartphone or you use a professional camera?
It's a DSLR. Okay. It's not like a super high-end one. It's a Canon Rebel T3 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I will have all that information in the show notes for this episode. So anyone who wants to maybe do one thing at a time, add on one thing at a time to learn, because I know there's a learning curve for Photoshop and Lightroom as well. And so, but thank you for those tips. That's very, very helpful, especially coming from someone who has studied this. So, what is, if any, a lesson that you think you've learned from your time selling on Etsy the hard way that you can share with us that will save someone else having to possibly go through the same thing?
I would probably say, and I don't want this to come off as like a dig on Etsy, but because I really like Etsy, but don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Don't put everything on Etsy and expect Etsy to never change, because it will change. Yeah. And I remember, I think it was I don't remember if it was 2016 or 2017, but I feel like they had made a change in like their search algorithm or something, and my sales dropped. They dropped to the point where I was really scared about the future of my business. And that's really when I started to pour a lot more time into my own website and really pushing my own website, because I kind of realized, wow, I don't really have any control of what Etsy does. And I mean, Etsy is a great platform. I get probably 85-90% of my sales come from Etsy. But I'm afraid to invest everything in Etsy and then have Etsy make some decision that then affects me.
Yeah. Yep. There's a lot of wisdom in that. And, especially going through 2018 and just some of the shocking news that people got. Like you said, it will change. But I think some of the biggest changes that people ever expected came in 2018 with, transaction fee increases, paid subscriptions and all.
Yep.
So
yep.
Definitely, spread your eggs out.
Yep.
Is there maybe one piece or two of advice that you would give to that seller who has been on the platform for a while already and maybe just feels like they've plateaued and just something isn't clicking? What would you say to that person right now?
I would say, I'd say probably two things. I would say to maybe look at your products and think about how you can improve the products that you already have, but then also how you can sort of expand your line of products around what you already have. So, for instance, I sell bottle openers, and when I feel like things might plateau, I will make a new kind of bottle opener and put that up there, because if people are already looking for a bottle opener and they see the ones I have, but the one that they see isn't really what they're interested in, they might look through the rest of your listings to find what else you have as far as that goes. So I think developing on the line of stuff that you already have is a good thing. Okay. And then the second thing is maybe do some exploring, like we talked about earlier. Get some inspiration. Go on Pinterest and Instagram and start looking at what other people are doing, and get some ideas on how maybe you could improve your shop.
Thank you for sharing that. Matt, are there any tools and resources that you're currently using now that you particularly enjoy, that you find very helpful, that you can share with us?
Sure. Like I said before, ShipStation has been really big for me because I sell on multiple platforms. And then the other one would be Etsy Rank. I know you've talked about this in the past on previous episodes, but Etsy Rank has been really, really helpful. And I just use their free version, but that's definitely helped when things have sort of plateaued. Like we talked about earlier, was going through and looking at my listings, and Etsy Rank has been huge for that. I think that's probably the only two that I could really give.
Okay. Yeah, I've constantly just hear amazing things about Etsy Rank. Anthony offers so much for free. It's amazing. And when I was having that conversation with him, I was like, you don't give anyone reasons to upgrade, but he has a reason for doing it. His wife sells on Etsy, and he really just wants to help people. Yep. And it's something that he knows how to do well, all that technical stuff. So I'm grateful for this tool that he has created for the Etsy community.
Yeah, it's really great.
And I will link to that in the show notes, as well as all the other resources that we've mentioned in this episode. And Matt, if anyone wants to connect with you, what's the best way they can link up with you?
If they just go to blackdogironworks.com, and they can fill out the form there. I think my phone number is actually on there too. So, that, and they can fill out the form and send me an email.
Okay. So I will again, definitely have a link to Matt's website, blackdogironworks.com. Please do go and check out his Etsy shop. It's Black Dog Ironworks. And I will have links to, if you don't mind, everywhere else you are on social media,
Sure.
as well as your Amazon Handmade shop, so that others can check you out.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I am so happy to have spoken with you. I didn't mention this earlier, but you have made me a mini celebrity in the eyes of some people in my family, because you have touched products that, which we didn't even mention that, but
Nope.
Do you mind if I say it?
No, that's fine.
Okay, so Matt has created and sold products to some celebrities that include the cast of Star Wars and Chris Pratt and Chris Pine and Margot Robbie. Margot Robbie. And
Yep.
I mentioned that to certain individuals in my family, and now they feel like I finally have celebrity status because I know somebody who has touched products that these true celebrities have actually touched. So thank you for upping my status.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, I know we were rounding up the conversation, but just really quickly, how did they find you? Do you even know?
Okay, so it's not as cool as it sounds. I don't want to get anyone's I don't want to get anyone's expectations, blown out of proportion. But
Yeah.
I got a message on Etsy from someone who has a gift box company out of California, and they were asking me about wholesale stuff. And after we'd had some conversation back and forth, and we came to a plan for what they wanted, they said, "Oh, by the way, your bottle openers are going in some gift baskets that are going to go to the cast of Star Wars." Wow. And of course, my mind was blown. And I started messaging her right back right away, asking her how that could possibly be. And so they just have some connections with some celebrities out there, some studios out there. Wow. And inevitably she came back, and every time she would come back, she would throw out another name of a celebrity who was selecting my work to be in their gifts that they were giving away. So it ended up, it was Chris Pratt and Chris Pine and Margot Robbie, and so pretty exciting.
Yeah, so that means they actually saw it and requested it.
Yeah, yep.
Amazing. Yeah, that's close enough for me. I'm going to run with that.
Yep.
Congratulations on that.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
And so this person who runs the gift box subscription found you on Etsy. Yep.
The gift box company is called the Gratitude Collaborative, and people should Google them. They're a great company. And she found me through Etsy. She was just looking through Etsy for items that she wanted to add into her gift boxes. So.
Oh, nice. Okay, I will link to the Gratitude Collaborative as well, so folks can check out what's going on there and what their mission is and what they do. And I'm actually glad that we talked about this, because I think, as much as things change on Etsy, and as we talked about, it's good to not have all your eggs in the Etsy basket, but there are still some really positive benefits from being on that platform. And if you can weather the storms of the changes that come, and they will come, I don't think we've seen the end of them. It can be worth it.
Oh yeah, I will never stop selling on Etsy. As long as things keep selling and people keep coming back, there's no reason to go.
Yes. So. There's a price to pay for everything, but there are rewards as well. So
absolutely,
it's worth it.
Yep.
Matt, thank you so much. For sure, this time I will let you go.
All right.
But thank you so much for being my guest on the podcast. I've truly enjoyed talking to you, and I would love to have you back on again to do a catch-up.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. And I thank you for listening to the podcast. I will be back again next time.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.